You didn't arrive here by random accident. Somewhere deep inside, something subtle yet undeniably powerful brought you to this very moment. By the time you reach the end, you'll see that this is not just another chance encounter. It's a quiet signal from within, a soft nudge from your soul that has been guiding you without any noise or spectacle. Transforming into your truest self doesn't require fireworks or loud declarations. It isn't about radically reinventing yourself on the surface. It's a gentle, almost invisible process that unfolds inwardly, like a seed breaking open beneath the soil long before anyone sees the sprout. This kind of change isn't about becoming someone entirely new. It's about peeling away everything that was never truly yours to carry in the first place. It's about remembering the essence you've always held at your core. Such transformation doesn't announce itself. It whispers. It can feel like waking up one morning and realizing you no longer fit inside the identity you once fought to protect. The places, conversations, and even parts of yourself that once defined you no longer resonate in the same way. Carl Jung once observed that authentic spiritual growth doesn't come from polishing or perfecting your personality. It comes from transcending it. That means letting go of everything that's not essential, the defenses and illusions you built to survive, and returning to that quiet, unwavering truth that has always been inside you. One of the first signs of this shift is that you no longer identify with your old personal story. What once felt like the centerpiece of your identity now feels like an old photograph. You can recall it, even appreciate it, but it no longer defines you. There's no urge to reject your past, but there's also no longing to relive it. When you remember, it feels calm, as if you're watching a movie whose ending you already know. You stop narrating your life from the wound. You no longer measure yourself by what you endured or accomplished. You understand deeply that your worth is beyond any single event. What happened no longer dictates who you are or limits who you can become. In the space that once held guilt, shame, or even pride, something softer emerges, a gentle freedom that allows you to see the past simply as the past. This shift isn't emotional detachment, it's integration. You no longer need anyone to fully understand your pain, nor do you seek validation for what you've been through. You no longer feel compelled to explain what shaped you. Your silence itself becomes a way of honoring it, and that's enough. Things that once triggered a deep reaction in you now pass without leaving scars. Words that once cut deeply dissolve before they reach your core. Relationships that used to anchor you to an outdated self lose their grip. Not because you forcefully push them away, but because there's nothing left in you for them to cling to. As you rise beyond your former self, your emotions no longer dictate your every reaction. Not because you've shut them off, but because you've learned how to separate what belongs to the present moment from what's simply a replay of an old pattern. You start to witness a change in your inner dialogue. Those old survival-based thoughts no longer dominate your mental space. You're not on a quest to redeem yourself, nor are you punishing yourself for who you once were. Instead, you observe, you learn, and you move forward, almost as if some deep, wordless wisdom inside you knows that every chapter of your life was necessary to lead you right here. This kind of deep knowing doesn't come from thinking harder, it comes from the soul. And it's within that soulful awareness that your old identity begins to dissolve. Not because it disappears entirely, but because you've simply stopped living there. Once you no longer inhabit that former version of yourself, something within you feels lighter. You don't erase your history, but you no longer use it as the foundation upon which you build your present. Your decisions begin to rise from a clearer, freer space, aligned with who you truly are now, not the story you once told about yourself. The labels and self-definitions you clung to, statements like, "This is just who I am," or "I can't change," start to lose their solidity. Not because you fought to dismantle them, but because they no longer make sense for the person you're becoming. You no longer act out of a need to protect a fixed identity. You've realized that your soul has no need for labels in order to feel alive. Transcending the old self isn't about destroying it. It's about honoring who you were, learning from it, and then moving forward without dragging along what no longer serves you. You stop clinging to the persona you once crafted for survival. You no longer feel compelled to repeat familiar emotional loops or reshape yourself to fit into places you've outgrown. The way you release all of this, softly, without resistance, is one of the clearest signs that you are no longer living from a conditioned self, but from your authentic self. This authentic self has no need to defend or prove anything. It simply exists in its own truth. And when that shift takes root, your way of connecting with others begins to change without you consciously trying. You start relating from a space that is more honest, more direct, and less burdened. You no longer seek from others the things you've learned to give yourself. You stop looking for a savior. You stop needing constant validation to feel real. In the past, many of your relationships may have been built on need, on unspoken pacts formed in pain, on unconscious emotional exchanges. But now, there is more space. Space to breathe, to pause before reacting, to observe without absorbing everything. As you transcend, you no longer repeat the emotional cycles that once kept you captive. It's not because the outer world has changed. It's because you no longer choose from your wounds. Your sensitivity, once a force that pulled you into situations blindly, begins to find balance. You no longer give from a place of emptiness or the hope that someone will fill a gap inside you. Instead, your giving flows from wholeness. That shift changes the nature of your relationships entirely. They stop serving as mirrors that reflect what you lack, and instead become reflections of the abundance you already hold within. You no longer seek conversations just to fill the silence, nor intimacy as a way to escape from yourself. For the first time, you're able to share openly from a place of fullness, not from a desperate need to be completed. This is the core of true transformation. When you no longer have to become something other than yourself to feel worthy of connection. When your past no longer defines you. When your emotions act as guides rather than rulers. When your life story is something you honor rather than live out in real time. That's when you know you are truly remembering who you are. Even if others don't resonate with you the way they used to, there's no drama, no internal fracture. Your emotional equilibrium is no longer dependent on whether people stay or go. In the past, your peace might have been in someone else's hands. Now, you hold it yourself. And with that, you discover a freedom that is both grounding and liberating. You stop running toward or away from people. You are simply present, steady in your own skin. Your presence, once a background detail, becomes your primary language of love. This is a love that doesn't demand attention, that doesn't perform for validation, and that doesn't keep score. It's quieter, deeper, and more real. It doesn't need to prove itself, because it exists naturally. You begin connecting from truth rather than image. You stop pouring your time and energy into conversations that leave you drained or relationships that exist only out of habit. Your energy refines itself and naturally filters out what doesn't align with you. The process may sting at first, but it brings both relief and clarity. Your old self often made choices from urgency, from the fear of being left behind, from the belief that acceptance required sacrifice. But now, you choose differently. You've made peace with your own company. You know that being with someone who doesn't connect with your true self can feel lonelier than being alone. So you stay with yourself, even if that means walking away from something you once called love. You no longer confuse intensity with truth, nor drama with depth. You've come to recognize that what brings peace has roots, and what requires constant friction to survive is often just a mask for disconnection. You stop forcing understanding. You no longer feel the need to convince anyone of your growth or justify why you can't remain in spaces that confine your soul. Your energy speaks for itself, quietly, powerfully, through the way you live and the way you choose. Your vibration, the natural frequency you carry simply by living in alignment, begins to speak louder than any words could. Without intention, it triggers reactions in others who have yet to cross their own inner thresholds. Some will drift away quietly. Others will draw nearer, not out of need, but from a space of honesty and resonance. And you will be at peace with either outcome, because your center is no longer determined by who remains in your life. Instead, your center shapes which relationships remain. In this new space, whatever stays in your orbit does so because it aligns with your truth, not because it's being forced to. This deep shift in how you relate to others begins to quietly reshape your entire reality. What once seemed essential begins to dissolve, not as an act of rejection, but as an act of clarity. This clarity comes from having explored your own darkness so thoroughly that you no longer need to project it onto others. Your former self sought mirrors, people who could confirm your worth, who could fill your empty spaces with partial presences and temporary comforts. But you are no longer available for those kinds of exchanges. You've learned that true connection does not consume you. It expands you. It never asks you to betray your essence in exchange for belonging. Instead, it invites you to live your essence more fully. And when you begin to connect from this renewed energy, everything changes. Connections feel lighter, more genuine, and more honest. The strength of a bond is no longer measured by its intensity or its constant activity, but by its frequency. Those silent moments where two people can exist together without explanation, rescue, or clinging. In this state, you learn to set boundaries not out of fear or defensiveness, but out of love for yourself. These boundaries aren't walls that divide. They are lines that bring structure and order to your energy, your time, and your emotional space. You no longer exhaust yourself maintaining what isn't growing with you. You don't cling out of fear of losing the little that remains. Instead, you recognize when something has reached its natural conclusion, and you allow it to go without resentment. You have shifted into a vibration that doesn't apologize for evolving. You no longer feel the need to ask for forgiveness for choosing your truth over convenience. That alone is proof that your old self no longer governs your relationships. Now it is your soul making the choices, choosing only what nourishes, uplifts, and reflects who you truly are. From this space, you begin to understand the purpose of companionship in its purest form. Not to complete you, but to share who you already are. You no longer seek shelter in the presence of others because you have become your own sanctuary. And this self-sufficiency is not isolation. It is maturity at the soul level. You stop carrying emotions that do not belong to you. You refuse to absorb the weight that others choose not to transform. You no longer fall into the trap of trying to heal those who have not yet decided to heal themselves. You no longer shrink yourself, trying to be enough by becoming less of who you truly are. You've realized that genuine love is never disguised sacrifice. It is presence without pressure, connection without chains. It's in this space of clean, quiet connection that the most powerful changes begin to take shape. Without trying, you become a mirror of transformation for others. Not because you aim to lead or fix them, but because your energy itself carries coherence. Your very presence becomes a gentle but undeniable reminder of truths they have avoided within themselves. Some will be grateful for this. Others may resist it. Either way, you remain steady because your relationships are no longer based on obligation, guilt, or a need to be needed. Here, you begin to see something profound. The deepest, most meaningful bonds are not built on promises of forever, but on a shared respect for each other's growth. Such bonds can only emerge after you've walked through your own personal transformation. You've faced your old self, embraced it, and released it, not in rejection, but with deep understanding. You finally see that your past self was never wrong or broken. It was simply doing the best it could to protect you with the knowledge and tools it had at the time. But that form of protection is no longer necessary. You no longer need to hide behind characters or masks just to feel worthy of love. You stop striving for acceptance in the eyes of others. Now, you simply are. And that, in itself, is enough. Without effort, without seeking approval, your essence begins to radiate more clearly than ever before. In this clarity, you discover a new form of intimacy. It's not about retelling every wound or narrating your history in exhaustive detail. It's about allowing yourself to be truly seen in the present moment, without decoration, without pretense. You no longer carry the heavy armor of past disguises. It no longer wounds you to be misunderstood, overlooked, or left behind. That's because your value no longer lives in how others perceive you. It lives in the relationship you've built with yourself. A relationship born in silence, nurtured in moments when you resisted falling back into old patterns, strengthened in days when you chose to hold yourself together even when nothing else was holding you. From those roots, your old self steps aside, not because you've banished it, but because it simply no longer resonates with your current vibration. You can look back at that former version of yourself with genuine gratitude, recognizing it not as a failure, but as a vital and irreplaceable chapter in your story. That version of you did the best it could with the knowledge it had, the tools it could reach for, and the beliefs it carried at the time. Even if some of those choices seem misguided now, you see them differently, not as mistakes to be erased, but as necessary steps that allowed you to stand where you are today. The struggles, the defenses, the ways you adapted, they were all survival strategies. But survival is no longer the only thing you know. Now you live in creation mode. In this state of conscious creation, the rigid mental and emotional structures that once defined you begin to dissolve. In their place, there's room for qualities you might have once dismissed as weakness, softness, subtlety, quiet confidence. These traits don't shout for attention, yet they carry immense power because they are authentic. You no longer feel the need to announce your worth to the world. Your soul doesn't try to prove its light. It simply radiates it through how you move, how you speak, and how you treat yourself and others. From this space, every relationship in your life, whether it stays, changes, or fades, becomes a reflection of your new way of being. Love no longer feels heavy, conditional, or like a constant test. It becomes a supportive energy that respects your individuality and honors your boundaries. Sharing no longer comes from a place of lack or a hope to be completed. It flows from the fullness you already hold. Choosing to connect with a person or commit to an experience is no longer an act of clinging. It's an act of honoring what aligns with the person you are now. Your perception of life shifts so deeply that you can't return to the old way of seeing. Situations you once labeled unfair now appear as necessary parts of a much bigger design. Events you used to regret now stand out as pivotal moments that taught you what no comfort ever could. You stop speaking to yourself in the language of victimhood. Instead, you acknowledge that even the most painful moments carried a purpose far beyond the suffering they caused. Transcending your old self isn't just about healing your wounds, it's about gaining a higher vantage point from which to view life itself. This new perspective doesn't sugarcoat reality, but it allows you to see the hidden order behind what once seemed chaotic. You begin to recognize life's challenges as silent teachings, each carrying a coded message meant to be understood when the time is right. Even your relationship with time transforms. You no longer live in a constant state of waiting for one day to arrive. You stop chasing what naturally drifts away, and you release the pressure for everything to happen immediately. Instead, you start to live in harmony with your soul's natural rhythm, a rhythm that moves at a pace guided by inner wisdom, not external urgency. In this rhythm, your priorities begin to reorganize themselves. What once consumed your mental energy now fades to the background, while things you previously overlooked, like moments of stillness, meaningful conversations, or simple acts of self-care, become sacred. You begin to value silence, to honor the pause between one chapter and the next, and to trust the process even when you can't see the whole picture. You no longer require guarantees to move forward. What you need is alignment, and when you feel it, you follow it without hesitation. That trust in your inner compass becomes your true source of security. This alignment with your truth becomes your compass, the silent guide shaping every choice you make. You no longer decide based on the fear of making mistakes, nor do you live under the weight of fulfilling other people's expectations. Your actions are no longer reactions to a painful past. They are deliberate, grounded acts of honoring your present. This single shift transforms the way you experience life. You stop trying to force meaning from every situation. You understand now that genuine insight often comes only after you've released the need to control the outcome. With this kind of energetic maturity, you step away from the urge to demand immediate answers from life. You allow space for the unknown. You embrace uncertainty without equating it to danger. This openness to the unknown doesn't make you passive. It refines your strength. Your power becomes quieter, more resilient, less dependent on outward demonstrations. You no longer feel the need to parade your progress or prove your transformation to anyone. Your silence speaks for you, and it speaks with an authority that words cannot match. This is the kind of confidence that doesn't require an audience. As you carry this into your daily life, you move with more awareness. The smallest, most ordinary moments begin to feel meaningful. The pause before you respond, the way the sun filters through a window, the sound of your own breath when you slow down enough to listen. You're no longer chasing the next milestone, nor measuring your value through visible achievements. You measure your growth in the stillness you feel when you wake up, in the calm you carry when you're alone, in the peace that hums quietly beneath the surface of your life. Transcending the old self means stepping beyond the identity you once clung to so tightly, learning to live from a higher plane of perception without trying to escape your physical life. You're not running from the world. You're moving through it differently. You're choosing how to experience your reality, rather than simply reacting to whatever arrives. This conscious choice to engage with life from a place of truth plants the seeds of transformation in every corner of your existence. What once felt like a burden now becomes an opportunity to be fully present. What once drained you now slips away without resistance, without resentment. This transformation might not be obvious to others, but it is deep and enduring because it no longer depends on external circumstances. Your inner peace doesn't hinge on things going your way. It flows from the way you live in alignment with who you truly are. And that alignment is non-negotiable. It becomes your anchor, your center, your unshakable point of reference. The old self sought worth through goals achieved, applause earned, and external validation. But you no longer chase these illusions. You've learned that real fulfillment comes quietly, in the way you breathe, in the dignity with which you walk away from what no longer serves you, without creating harm or conflict in the process. You start viewing challenges in a new light. They're no longer punishments or random obstacles meant to break you down. Instead, they reveal themselves as thresholds, gateways your soul must pass through in order to awaken dormant parts of yourself. You stop running from them. You face them with the deep inner knowing that they are not here to destroy you, but to uncover more of who you really are. This shift changes your energy at its core. The frequency you radiate is no longer tangled with fear or hesitation. It carries truth. This truth doesn't need defense. It lives in your eyes, in your voice, in the stillness you carry into any space. And with that inner clarity, you begin to see that the greatest transformation hasn't been in your external circumstances, but within yourself. You realize the deepest change was never about rearranging your environment or altering how others perceive you. It was always about learning to see life through the lens of your awakened soul, rather than through the filter of a self that believed it needed constant fixing or proving. From this awakened perspective, the ordinary becomes sacred. It's not because the outside world has shifted, but because you no longer view it through the eyes of scarcity or fear. Your gaze softens. It expands. Gratitude begins to color even the simplest experiences. You no longer need divine signs to believe, nor do you require absolute certainty before taking a step forward. You begin to move with an inner rhythm that feels slower, not because your actions have decreased, but because you've stopped chasing things that were never meant for you in the first place. This inner slowing is not stagnation. It is spaciousness. You give yourself the freedom to choose differently, even if no one else understands your choice. You allow yourself not to have all the answers, to release control, to let the mystery of life unfold on its own terms. You trust, at a deep and quiet level, that life is not working against you, but alongside you. When you create this sacred space within yourself, alignment begins to happen naturally. Not because you're forcing it or working harder than before, but because you've stopped resisting what is. Your vibration becomes magnetic, not in the sense of trying to attract everything, but in naturally drawing only what resonates with your truth. You no longer grip tightly to what's not meant for you. You no longer push desperately for outcomes. What's truly aligned will remain. What isn't will fade without conflict, without chaos. Even the difficulties that still appear take on a new shape. They don't shatter you the way they once did, because you no longer meet them with the same wounded energy. You meet them with depth, with patience, with a focus on alignment rather than victory. You meet life without urgency, but with presence. You no longer strive to be someone in the eyes of the world. You focus on embodying who you truly are. In this embodiment, transformation happens naturally. It's not loud or flashy, but it's complete. Even if no one else notices, you feel it in the way you move through your days, in the choices you make, and in the peace that remains steady no matter what swirls around you. When your energy aligns with your truth, life responds in kind. There's no longer a need for chaos or struggle to push you forward. Instead, synchronicity begins to appear. Clarity emerges from what once felt confusing, and the guidance you receive is so subtle that it feels like a quiet whisper inside. A voice that doesn't demand, but reminds you of what you've always known deep down. You're not the same as you once were. You've crossed an invisible threshold, and that crossing isn't marked by a grand announcement, but by the small, steady signs in your everyday life. The way you no longer react to old triggers. The way hurtful words now pass through you without anchoring. The way your pace has slowed to something that feels sustainable. The change has happened at your roots. It's so deep, it doesn't even need a name. You notice it in your ability to choose peace over performance, to sit in silence without anxiety, to welcome uncertainty without losing your center. You see it in how you focus on what's essential, without the need to dress it up or prove it to anyone. Your energy no longer scatters in 1,000 directions. It gathers, becoming a steady current flowing from a source within you, one that has no name, needs no explanation, and cannot be taken away. That source comes from a connection deeper than your identity, deeper than your labels, deeper than your personal story. You no longer live to maintain an image. You live to express an essence. This essence has always been within you, waiting patiently while you were busy chasing approval, proving your worth, or surviving old wounds. It waited for you to stop circling the same distractions and finally turn inward. And when you did, the letting go happened naturally, not as a grand achievement, but as a quiet byproduct of choosing honesty over habit, presence over pretense. You stood by your soul even when silence felt harder than noise. You refused to turn back, even when it would have been easier than moving forward. And in doing so, you stepped fully into a life where your old self no longer calls the shots. Now, standing in authenticity, you begin a new chapter, not one driven by reaction, but one grounded in presence. You no longer chase approval because you've remembered your worth simply by existing. You no longer seek belonging from the outside because you've discovered that your soul's true home has always been within you. Life stops feeling like a race you must win and becomes a sacred unfolding moment by moment. Not because everything is perfect, but because you've stopped resisting what isn't. You welcome each moment, not with resignation, but with a peace born from reconciliation with the now. Your days no longer feel like an endless loop of repetition. They become a living expression of your new frequency. Every word you speak, every glance you give, every step you take carries the quiet imprint of someone who has chosen to live from their center. That imprint, though invisible to the eye, leaves a real impact. A soul that has transcended its old self doesn't need to move mountains to change the world. Its very presence is a form of healing, a silent medicine that shows others that living in alignment is not only possible, but deeply powerful. You become proof that healing is not a myth, that letting go doesn't mean forgetting, and that evolving doesn't mean rejecting who you once were. Instead, it means honoring the journey, every high, every low, every twist, as a necessary path toward this present moment. Every step has prepared you for this one. And now that you are here, your energy speaks for you, and the world responds in kind. If these truths stir something deep within you, it's not coincidence, it's recognition. Your soul has always known, and it was simply waiting for you to remember. Remembering yourself is not the end of a story, it's the start of a new one. This is the beginning of fully returning to yourself, without fear, without masks, without the heavy weight of false identities. Carl Jung once said that enlightenment doesn't come from imagining figures of light, but from making the darkness conscious. In those few words lies a truth most people spend their entire lives avoiding. Facing your darkness, acknowledging your shadow, is one of the most terrifying and liberating acts you will ever undertake. It's not just a poetic metaphor. It's a raw, often painful process of peeling back every layer of who you thought you were, only to meet the parts of yourself you tried so hard to ignore or hide. And yet, if you are here now, it's because something inside you has already shifted. You've crossed that invisible line where you no longer fear the dark corners of your mind. You've stopped running. You've dared to look inward, to confront the wounds, memories, and patterns that once controlled you. That is no small step. It's the true beginning of transformation. The shadow is not an enemy to be destroyed. It's a part of you that has been quietly waiting, not for rejection, but for acceptance. Making the darkness conscious means learning to see it, to name it, and to integrate it. When you do, something extraordinary happens. The parts of you that once felt broken become the wellspring of your deepest wisdom. Pain transforms into a teacher. Fear becomes a compass. Chaos turns into a doorway leading to clarity. You've walked that path. You've taken your shadow by the hand and said, "I see you, I know you're here, and I'm ready to listen." That takes a rare kind of courage, one that many avoid for an entire lifetime. But you didn't. You chose to turn your shadow into a bridge rather than a burden. Now, you move through the world with a grounded presence, rooted in truth and authenticity. And if in some way this space, these reflections, has accompanied you along that path, know this: you are not alone. You are part of something larger than yourself, a collective awakening, a shared remembering. There are others like you, stepping out of illusion and into authenticity, choosing presence over perfection, wholeness over avoidance. So if your heart feels called to keep going, to keep shedding what's false and embracing what's real, then continue walking with us. Every step you take inward sends ripples outward. Every time you choose truth over comfort, light over denial, something in the world shifts. You are no longer who you were, and you are not alone in this. If these words resonate deep in your being, it's because they echo the truth your soul already carries. This space exists for souls like yours, for those ready to live from depth, presence, and inner clarity. So, if you haven't yet, take a moment to subscribe, not just to a channel, but to a movement of consciousness. Every video, every shared reflection here is meant to support your journey and remind you of who you truly are beneath all the noise. Subscribe, and let's keep walking this path together.